now there it is, the remake of the best SpongeBob game ever made. Alright, I'm gonna get this out of the way up front. This is not a proper review of this game, since for the most part it is very much similar to the original version. Now, if you do want my opinion on the actual, original version of the game itself, I did do a review in the past of it. Now, granted, it is a much older review, where my quality of video is definitely not going to be like today's. But at least all my thoughts are probably the same thoughts that I have today of the game, so it still counts. But yeah, instead of this being an actual review, this is going to be more so, I guess, a comparison between the original version and this version. And at the end, I'll conclude which version is better, as well as which version I would personally choose, and I guess which one the average Joe should choose. And before we begin, I should also say I apologize for the footage. The fact that this is back when I still recorded with the Xbox Live party chat overlay still on, so that's just going to be a little annoyance that keeps popping in and out in the upper right corner. But anyway, let's get this show on the road. And to start off with, we're going to talk about the most obvious difference between the two versions, which is the graphics, where the original is very much in its early 2000s sort of way, where it tries to emulate the show as best it can with the technology that the creators had. And well, I mean, they did a really good job. It's just that looking at it today, it's not as good as you probably remember it. And then you look at this version and it's like a complete perfect transition of the show from 2D to 3D. I mean, everything looks so on point, from the character models to the environments to even just how bright and colorful it is. I mean, it's so bright and colorful that it's honestly kind of funny to look back on the original and see how muted the color palette was. But then again, this is trying to emulate the show, and the show of today is much different than the show looked back in the day. Now, for this category, how would the average person vote and how would I vote? Well, the average person would obviously probably go for what looks better. If they had both of these games at the same time being shown, they would probably pick the one that's more modern and clean looking over the one that, despite its rustic charm, is much more outdated. Now, as for me, well, I've been playing the original game for all my life, so I'm so much used to those versions of the characters and whatever else. But at the same time, I can't deny just how good this version of the game looks. And well, I'm not really one of those people who go for good graphics. You know, I'm fine with them just as long as they're not so bad that they make your eyes bleed. But at the end of the day, I can't. It's just the simple fact that the newer version is just more visually appealing to me, I guess. So yeah, ultimately to me it doesn't really matter, but if I had to choose, I guess it would be the better looking one. Alright, so I guess that's 1 point for the remake in both categories. Alright, moving on to the rest of the stuff, which was all, for the most part, really not that changed very much, but it was still changed, so we gotta talk about them. Starting with the gameplay.
And well, the gameplay, I mean, it's the same thing that you were doing in the other game, you know, running around defeating robots, destroying tikis to get shiny objects. It's just that now the characters are much more smoother, and they move a bit faster, I noticed. Which, I mean, it's nice, a neat little bonus, but, I mean, overall, it wasn't really necessary, but
Alright, that didn't end up sounding as good as I was hoping. Oh well. But yeah, with what I said, this one really just comes down to experience, I guess. Like, if you have it so hardwired in your brain how to play the original version, that if you were to play this version, you would just crack, I guess. It would be impossible for you to do so. But the normal person probably never played the original, so slipping right into this should be fine for them. And well, as for me, I mean, I was able to, at the very least, call out that there were differences, so I did notice them at the very least. And well, I mean, again, they are nice little extras. It's just that I personally don't see much need for them. So for this category, I'd probably stick with what I know. Alright, now that is 2 points for the common man on the remake, and 1 point for each for me. Alright, next up we have the music. or I guess just the audio in general, which I'll explain later, but for now, there is the actual music to talk about. And well, the original version of this game has a great soundtrack. It feels very much in theme with SpongeBob and completely captures the locations very well. And they're just in general great tracks to listen to. So then you have the remake and its version of the music, so you think it would be like complete new remixes, right? With new instruments and new bells and whistles and whatever else. Well, surprisingly no, actually. What this game does is this weird, like, I want to call it not a remix, but an enhancement of, I guess, the music. But when I say enhancement, it's like just ever so slightly. Like, there is new stuff there, it's just you could barely hear it, though. Like, if you were to just listen to it regularly, you would think it was just the regular version of the song. But in reality, it's not. It's the new version, but the only way you would be able to tell is if you're like listening with high quality or like headphones to hear all the differences, however minute they may be. I mean, you probably wouldn't even be able to tell the difference if you were to be listening to them side by side. There's also the fact that I'm using the remastered music for this very review, and I can't even tell that there's much of a difference. I mean, heck, you watching probably thought I was using the original soundtrack as well. But enough about the little differences. How would I approach this topic, and how would the average Joe? Well, for me, I honestly just don't see enough of effort from the remastered music to give it what it's worth, I guess. You know, the original music was made for the game, while this one kind of just took it and didn't really do much with it. Like, I guess a metaphor would be that the original music was the house that was built at first, and then the remastered music is like an extra room that was added on. Like, the extra space is nice, but it wasn't really necessarily needed. It would have been more significant to build a house based off of the original house built instead of just adding on to what was already built, but build it in a way that's different from what was originally built. And that's, well, just for me. As for the average Joe, I can kind of see this going either way. I mean, maybe with the full context, you would probably make it go towards the original because, again, all the original people made that music, while the remake really didn't do anything with it. So for those reasons, I'm going to give a point in both categories for the original. But hold on, I did say that this was for the audio in general, so that means not just the music, but also the dialogue. So for the other half of this category, we have to talk about the characters and their speaking roles. And well, I'm honestly just putting this here because it's kind of a slam dunk for the original, as well as kind of a rant by me. That is because, to my knowledge, none of the voiceover for this game was ever re-recorded. And well, that's not that big of an issue because it's not like this was such an old game that the microphone quality and the file sizes would have compressed the hell out of the speaking roles. It sounds perfectly fine, even today. And well, the original team did a great job getting all the voice actors to come along and do the game. And the voice actors themselves are giving it their all. They're like they're working on the show. So then why do I have to rant about it? Well, here's why. Because the simple fact of the matter is that they did not get every single character's voice actor to appear in the game. And I really don't want to discredit who replaced them, but it's honestly so obvious that you could tell, even to like the casual fan of SpongeBob, that they've been replaced. And these two characters are Mermaid Man and Mr. Krabs. Here's how Mermaid Man sounded in the show. And here's how he sounds in the game. And here's Mr. Krabs how he sounds in the show.
Money, that profit will make me wallet fat. What? Profit's down $3 from last month?
And here he is in the game.
Of course. What are employers for? Besides, them shiny objects is worth lots of money.
And it's just like they really couldn't get the original voice actors to come out and reprise their roles for this remake and finally get them in here instead of the discount versions. Now, unfortunately, the voice actor for Mermaid Man would pass away long before this Remake was conceived, so they couldn't do anything there. But I mean, Mr. Krabs' voice actor is still alive and kicking. They couldn't get him. But yeah, they did nothing with the dialogue audio and just kept it all in. I mean, I will say that the actual character models themselves do emote more while talking, but that's more of a graphics thing. Regardless, the score is going to stay the same way it was, this audio point going both categories for the original. Alright, with that out of the way, let's move on to the second to last category, accessibility. And obviously for the remake, it was made for modern day consoles and PCs, so you could basically get it anywhere and play it on just about anything, which obviously will win over the average Joe easily since convenience is king. So then what about me, and what if you actually wanted to play the original version? Well, in today's world, immediately you would think of just downloading an emulated version of it, you know, that you would probably play on Dolphin or whatever. But let's pretend like that option doesn't exist for a moment. What then would be the best way to play it? Well, you could always dig out your 6th generation consoles and a copy of a game and hope it all works and play it, or go onto eBay and rebuy everything you need to play it, however expensive it might be. Or you could be one of those people who are lucky enough to be somewhere in between by owning a console that is able to play it through the magic of backwards compatibility. You know, since the Wii was able to play all GameCube games, the Xbox 360 was able to play certain Xbox games, but this was on the list. Although apparently you needed a hard drive to do this, so if you don't have one, that sucks. And the games wouldn't play 100%, but I mean, the bugs didn't seem that major in the listings, for this game at least. And well, the PS3, that's a bit of a touchy one, but I'm pretty sure nowadays they have the online marketplace to play older games. I wouldn't be surprised if this is on there. So yeah, quite the many few ways if you want to play the original available to you. Well then, what about me? Well, I already showed the picture earlier of my childhood copy that I still have after all these years, and I honestly don't really mind having to hook up older systems just to play it. As I also showed earlier in the video, even if I wanted to play the other version, I would just put the disc in and that would be it. But yeah, for this round, I'm easily giving myself a point towards the original. And these are the scores as they currently are, as we move on to the final round. A final round that I'm only just now realizing is less of a round and more of a rant on me about the remake again. That is because we are now going to talk about the disappointing bonus material of the remake. You see, when this game originally came out, it did so with 2 pieces of missing content. The first of which was a cut robotic Squidward boss, which people found out about because there was concept art that was available in-game to find and see. The second of which only was found through, like going through the game files, was a cut section of a level, or possibly even a cut level altogether. I honestly don't know. Because what is believed to be either Patrick's dream from the original game or Glove World was found like not completely completed, but still in the game files, obviously. And well, when the remake was announced, one of the key factors that was coming alongside the game was the restoration of these 2 zones, as well as the addition of a multiplayer game mode. So then I thought, okay, we're finally gonna get this cut content and we're gonna be able to do it all in single player and play these things we never saw before. That would be cool. But you want to know what they did instead? They put it all in multiplayer. The boss fight as well as pieces from that cut level. And you know, it's just like, come on. So then what about the multiplayer itself? Is it any good? It's alright. I mean, you can play as characters that weren't available in the main game, like Mr. Krabs or Plankton or Squidward or whatever. But I mean, it's just you fighting robots endlessly. It's fine. Oh, and then you fight, I think, the Squidward robot at the end. But I mean, it's freaking... I think it's 40 waves worth of it. It just goes on way too long, but honestly, I feel like it's ultimately just pointless to be there. But anyway, if I were to be looking at this section as a real section, I'd probably call it the extra content section. So then how would I rank it, and how would the average Joe? Well, with the average Joe not having probably played the original and not knowing about all what I just said, he'd probably just say more content in the remake, and that's just the simple fact of the matter. More content in your game means more bang for your buck, even if it isn't as good as the main game itself. So yeah, easy point for him on the remake. So then what about me? Well, since I've already expressed my vast disappointment in this subject, I think it's pretty obvious, but if I were to put my opinions aside and look at this objectively, I would have to agree with the average Joe. There's just the simple fact of this has more content in it than the original. But just because I agree with that sentiment doesn't mean I have to like it. And because of that, instead of giving this section a full point towards the remake, I'll instead give it a half point. Because they did technically keep their promise. However half-assed it was. I mean, when the Game Boy Advance version has something that you don't, you know you did something wrong. And well, that finishes this competition up with the final scores right here. And as we could see from these unpredictably shocking results, I would prefer the original while the average Joe would prefer the remake, but at least it wasn't a complete blowout. Alright, time for my closing remarks on the remake itself. Well, simply put, at the end of the day, this remake is perfectly fine. It does some things well and other things crappy. If this was the first way you played this game, then there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, hell, my final takeaway with this remake is that the simple fact that even if it did a few things wrong, it overall just allowed people that never may have played the original to finally experience this game, as well as allow people who have played the original to replay it with a whole new coat of paint over it. I mean, I definitely know I was one of those people who were over the moon happy when this thing got announced, and then when I finally got it and replayed it, I had the joy of, well, replaying one of my favorite games. So yeah, because of those reasons, I think that this remake being even just existing is really cool, and allows me to give a pass on all the stuff that it falters on. And yeah, that's really all I gotta say about this game. Well, in the end, this remake could have been a whole lot better, but at the same time, I'm just happy that it exists. Alright, we got a Battle for Bikini Bottom remake done, so where's the movie game remake? Come on, Purple Lamp, don't leave us hanging.